Just before we start, what we are talking about today, we need your undivided attention. Last week, we promised you a revolution by Wednesday. Now we want to prove it to you. So you must pay careful attention. And you must listen to the videos we have prepared for you. So first of all, we will have a word of prayer. And let us bow our heads as we have a word of prayer. Gracious loving Father, please forgive us of our sins. Please justify us. Please make us righteous. Please grant us your Holy Spirit to teach us, that we may see the truth, that we may know how late time is, and that we may know what to expect. You have given us special light, extra light on the matter. This is what we ought to know. So bless us and help us as we prepare for the end, which is swiftly coming. In Jesus' holy name we pray. Amen. After I have presented what I have presented here, I'm giving you kind of a short story, a kind of short one, because we want to start back by 3:30 this evening, so that Sister Anissa and Sister Alyssa will give a full report and video footage from the vaccine conference they went to in Chicago, Illinois. A lot of things happened, and God has opened the way for us. But they will explain when they come up. So, what we are attempting to show you here, you need to pay careful attention. Last week, we promised a revolution. This revolution was about Europe. And this revolution did take place. So we want you, by God's grace, to be able to interpret events as it has been happening towards the end of this world. Watchman, what of the night? The night cometh, and also the day. What of the night? Terrible things are happening right now. Those of you whose minds are on other things apart from the truth do not understand that the world food supply is being destroyed. We have a big famine looming right before us. They have not been able to plant because the weather have destroyed food crops and have inhibited planting. Those of you who use a lot of soybean products will not have that in a short while. All the soybean crop in Argentina, a large amount in Brazil, have been destroyed. The areas in the United States where they plant, those areas have been inundated with flood and water. Many people who were supposed to plant were not able to plant. And it just goes way back to India. Even India with their mango crop. Do you know that one of the biggest money-making producers in India is through mangoes? And now we have come to a stage where in India, their mango crop have been destroyed. Areas that produce a lot of wheat, even in Canada, have been thoroughly destroyed. Hail has fallen and destroyed produces in many places. Even if you go to Indonesia, even if you go to one of those other countries, banana products have been destroyed by hail and wind, destroying everything. So we have a looming food crisis right before us. And that's the reason why anytime you get any chance to plant, get a little pot, plant something that you can help yourself. The government can't feed everybody. But you can help yourself with the aid of the Holy Spirit. And while all these things have been going on, Europe has swung to the right. Europe have rediscovered Catholicism, but not the one like the Pope is preaching. As I stand here, the revolution continues right now in Europe, and it is all towards a Sunday law. This had to happen. I remember speaking to Brother Aaron in Canada and asking him, what can we expect of Britain? It seems as if there is no political party to help Britain deal with the globalists that are destroying the countries. And they will need some kind of help. Within 6 weeks, they now have a party to bring a Sunday law in Britain. Within 6 weeks. So we want you to observe 2 videos that we want to show you here. And then we will shortly come to an end. But I ask you to pay attention to the details of the video, to what it is saying. Because what this video is saying is very important for us to understand. The European Union is identified in Revelation chapter 17. Let's look at it. From verse 12. Pay careful attention to what you're reading. It says this, and the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings that have received no kingdom as yet. That is in John's time. In John's time, in 96 ACB, when the book of Revelation was written, Europe did not exist as nations. And the 10 nations of Europe define Europe. Whether you have smaller enclaves or smaller nations making them up, when you say 10 nations, you are just defining the barbarians, Europe. So notice what we are told here. Again, I read. It says this, verse 12. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. In Bible prophecy, that 1 hour is 15 days. The beast here is the illuminist, globalist beast. So in other words, the nations of Europe will turn towards Illuminism, towards globalism, towards socialism. And in the last 15 days of the Earth's history, it will happen for big destruction all over the world. It goes on. Verse 13. These have one mind. The word for mind here is opinion, one opinion. So it is dealing with the political view of Europe. These have one opinion. That's what we are told. We read on. And shall give their power, the actual word there for power in the Greek is dunamis, which means their dynamics. What is the dynamics of a nation? The dynamics of a nation is how a nation is run. A nation is run by its constitution. So the constitution of Europe will be given over to this scarlet-colored beast. And let's read on again. They will give their power and strength. The word for strength there is their executive authority unto the beast. So in other words, the executive authority of Europe will be given over to the scarlet-colored beast, which is communism, Illuminism. But before that happened, Europe must take a swing to the right. For Europe to give its power unto the scarlet-colored beast, it does this to destroy all false religion. Because this giving the power to the scarlet-colored beast, we are being told where communists will be rushing and murdering and burning down churches, murdering priests, killing preachers, blowing up church members and killing them as the end draws near in the last 15 days of the earth's history. This is to happen. So the Bible is showing us the trouble that comes in the very last 15 days of the earth's history. But before that comes, Europe now must make a swing to the right to get a Sunday law. By Wednesday, Europe made that swing to the right. But you see, the Pope is a socialist, leftist, communistic Pope. And no evangelical is going to exalt that kind of Pope. No evangelical, no religious movement is going to exalt a man that embraces sodomy, that denies the plan of salvation in any form. None is going to exalt that man. So for the papacy to be exalted, the Pope has to change. For America to exalt the papacy, according to Revelation 13, that Pope has to go. But you see, Europe had to swing right first. Now that has already been fulfilled. All you need now is for this Pope to go. And when he goes, the evangelical forces in America is going to exalt a new one that favors preserving religion and not like Pope Francis. You and I are so close that you must be able to discern and understand the events as they are being fulfilled. And we want to afford you to do this. We're going to play the first video. Occasionally I will just pause and point something out to you. So we're starting now with the first video. Pay attention wherever you are. If even if you don't understand, even after the video, we're going to look at a chart which explains the videos. So let's go on.
The elites have never accepted the fact that populist conservatives and economic nationalists around the globe are on the rise. Here in the U.S., think about it. The deep state rose up against Trump during and after the election by using informants, the FISA court, surveillance powers, and a special counsel investigation, 2 years, $35 million, to try to oust him from office. In the end, we're going to find out that the Obama DOJ did a lot more to hurt America than some pathetic Russian hackers ever could. And ever since Trump was elected, the global establishment has suffered from wishful thinking syndrome.
A huge blow to the wave of populism that helped sweep Donald Trump into office.
Nationalism versus globalism, and in this case, the growing tide of populism appears to have receded.
No question this was a big blow to what's being called know-nothing populism.
You can't look at this election in any other way but to see it as a repudiation of Trump.
Oh, whoops. How can so many people get paid to be so consistently wrong? And they're supposed to be experts. Of course, you might have heard over the weekend, populists, nationalists made stunning gains in the EU elections, especially in Britain. Now, remember, 3 years ago, Nigel Farage of the UKIP party forced a referendum where the voters chose to leave the European Union, the so-called Brexit. But ever since then, the establishment parties have done everything in their power to slow things down or just to try to thwart the will of the people altogether. And now, 2 prime ministers later, the people still don't have their independence from the bureaucrats in Brussels. Well, just 6 weeks ago, Farage came back out of retirement and founded the Brexit Party. And in a stunning rebuke of the old Labour and Conservative parties, it won nearly 32% of the vote and captured 29 seats in the European Parliament, with the other parties basically obliterated. It was the worst national election for Theresa May's Conservative Party ever. Well, like the Trump victory back in 2016, Farage led an insurgent campaign, and he stuck to his message. The UK wants out of the EU.
Well, at the end of the day, it's about what voters want, and I think either the Conservative or Labour parties take us towards Brexit, or they're going to have to be replaced. It's as simple as that.
In France, Marine Le Pen's National Rally Party beat out Macron's pro-EU centrist party, winning the most French seats at the EU. Nationalists in Italy also took the most seats. And all over Europe, people are demanding their freedom from the international shackles put on by faraway regulators who don't know and can't respond to their country, their people, or their needs. Now, while most are fine to have strong economic relationships with their member nations, the populists, the more economic nationalists among them, still want to retain their language, their borders, and their own unique culture. And when you read the New York Times, though, or CNN, you listen to them, they always use the phrase anti-immigrant or far-right parties made the gains. Almost invariably, that description is false. Again, the slime is being thrown at Trump or Salvini or Le Pen or Viktor Orban in Hungary, and it's meant only to denigrate, not to advance an actual debate about how to improve people's standard of living. Time after time, rather than listen to the people and use these moments as an opportunity to learn and change, instead the global elites just run in the other direction. And I think of Angela Merkel, the woman responsible for Europe's admission of 1 million plus refugees. And let's face it, that has been a disaster from Italy to Sweden and everywhere in between. Now, the German chancellor seems to have learned nothing, and she answered a reporter's question, and that reporter was equally in denial.
Under your nearly 15 years in power, in some cases, those dark old demons have risen again.
Germany can and will not uncouple itself from developments we see all over the world. We see this in Germany as well. But in Germany, obviously, they always have to be seen in a certain context, in the context of our past, which means we have to be that much more vigilant than others. We have to tell our young people what history has brought over us and others, and these horrors.
The horrors. Well, in other words, if you voted for a populist or nationalist party, you're essentially, in some way, empathizing with what, Hitler or Hitler in waiting? It's ridiculous. Italian Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini, who led the Italian populist nationalists to historic gains in the EU, had the perfect response.
Quindi Italia, Francia Inghilterra, è il segno di un'Europa che cambia. Il voto degli altri popoli europei ha dato un mandato chiaro: l'Europa dei tagli e della disoccupazione è fallita. È stato bocciato Tsipras in Grecia, la Merkel, Macron, Theresa May, ovunque l'Europa della precarietà e della disoccupazione è stata bocciata.
Yeah, the elites are being rejected because they failed. They've been routed. And worse results are coming their way because they refuse to hear the voters. Now, as Trump has shown here at home, a strong, muscular approach on trade, lower taxes, fewer regulations, and a foreign policy based in prudent realism, it's all paying off. Check out our economy compared to Europe's. Basically, no comparison whatsoever. Look at that. EU 1.5% GDP, US 3.2% GDP, unemployment about, well, almost double in Europe. Translation, Trump's policies work, as the European model barely limps along.
Just read what you are seeing on the screen.
As President of the United States, I will always put America first. Just like you, as the leaders of your countries, will always and should always put your countries first.
We finally turned him into a colony, and that was our plan from the first moment. We finally turned him into a colony, and that was our plan from the first moment. We finally turned him into a colony, and that was our plan from the first moment. We finally turned him into a colony, and that was our plan from the first moment.
European election has brought a lot of parties to the right. So now we want you to pay attention to what is being said here. Listen carefully. Your future, your immediate future is wrapped up with this. So drop all kind of unnecessary thoughts one side, and also drop the idea that you can't make to learn. And pay attention. It's simple English. And you have the Holy Spirit.
The results of the European election are still coming in. We have a pretty good idea where things stand now. There's some big victories. There's also some big disappointments. As far as the big victories, there's probably no country that did better than Italy. Italy was just an absolute runaway success for the right. Hungary was also a big success. Poland, the National Rally Party in France, the Brexit Party in the United Kingdom. All things considered, Austria was basically a big success. Czech Republic did very well. And Flanders, which is not a country but a region, was a huge runaway success. Okay, the first two things I need to bring up are about Greece and Britain. The Prime Minister of Greece has called for an early snap election based on the outcome of the EU election in Greece. Now, his party is called the Coalition of the Radical Left. They control almost half of the Greek parliament, but they got less than a quarter of the vote today. New Democracy came in first place with about a third of the vote. They are a very weak center-right party. The craziest thing about the Greek results, 21% of the Greeks voted for a huge number of teeny tiny parties that barely got anything each. There was two nationalist parties that got over 4% each. Golden Dawn, which is going to get 2 seats, and a new party called Greek Solutions, which is going to get 1 seat. Okay, now for some good news. In Italy, the right just completely steamrolled everything. Matteo Salvini's League Party took close to 34% of the vote. They're going to get 38% of Italy's seats, 28 seats. The Brothers of Italy are taking another 5 seats. Berlusconi's party is going to get 7 seats. That's 55% of the seats going to the Italian center-right coalition. Five Star Movement, which is like a big tent, anti-establishment populist party, is taking 14 of the seats. The Social Democrats are only getting 26% of the seats. It was a huge victory for the right in Italy. In Hungary, another big victory for the right. The Fidesz party is taking 13 of Hungary's 21 seats. In Poland, the Law and Order party got something like 44%. They're going to have 22 seats in the European Parliament. Confederation, which is a cartel of hardline nationalist parties, they got about 6.5%. They're going to get 3 seats. Now, Austria was realistically a victory because if you watched my previous videos, the Austrian Freedom Party was supposedly crushed by an alleged scandal. Right now, they're at over 17%. They're going to get probably 3 seats.
All right there, everyone. We are looking at nothing short of a European Union nightmare, and I want to explain why the bullies in Brussels are terrified. New York Times finally admitting that the world is becoming more and more nationalist and populist. They are realizing that populations are moving away from globalism and more towards nation, culture, custom, and tradition. And now even the premier publication of the left-wing globalist media is recognizing that. In this video, I want to go over a nation-by-nation analysis of the elections to give you a sense, again, of how well the nationalist populist right did and why the bullies in Brussels are terrified. Do not let their feigned rhetoric or the media's spin fool you. The bullies in Brussels are panicked. They're panicked because they see the trajectory, the trends here. Again, the huge thing to get in all of this, okay? The huge thing is you've got to take a long-term view here. If you've got to identify the trends, the 3 to 5 to 10-year trends going on here to appreciate just how astonishing these European elections were. And that's what I want to try to give to you here. And if you understand that, you'll understand why the bullies in Brussels are panicked, why this weekend was such a nightmare. So let's start with the heavyweights of that nightmare, where the nationalist populace completely dominated. And that means we've got to begin with Italy. And I talked about Italy in the last video, but Matteo Salvini's Lega is simply put now the largest party in their entire nation officially. No one even comes close to Lega, the Italian League. Look for snap elections there in Italy in the next couple of months. There's no way Salvini is going to be playing second fiddle to anyone anymore in the populist 5-star. It looks like a combination of Lega and the Brothers of Italy, which is the other nationalist populist party. It looks like they'll have easily the 40% needed for a functioning government in Italy and creating a coalition there. Forza Italia will probably join that coalition, which should give them over 50% support. Very, very strong coalition there for Italian politics. The other massive winner last night, of course, was the Brexit Party. They tied with Germany's CDU as the largest party in the EU. The Brexit Party will represent an astonishing 28 seats in the next European Parliament. Just to give you a sense of the magnitude of that, the Tories will be sitting in 3 seats. The centrist parties, the globalist mainstream parties, completely caved in Britain, along with Italy. The globalist political order is, for all practical purposes, dead in the UK and Italy now, okay? So we'll have to see how that plays out domestically, right, with Boris Johnson most likely taking the helm of the Conservatives, with Nigel Farage in Brussels. Can you imagine what Farage's opening speech is going to be like in Brussels? Can you even fathom the smirk he's going to have on his face when he enters into that Parliament building? I mean, I'll pay money to see it. In addition to Italy and Britain, we of course have Poland and Hungary, okay? It really was an astonishing win in Poland. A number of pro-EU globalist parties formed a coalition, what they called an opposition pro-European coalition, that thought it could beat out the reigning nationalist Law and Justice Party and bring a victory to pro-EU forces. But alas, it was not to be. The nationalist right Law and Justice Party has won in Poland, and they received 43% of the vote as over and against the opposition coalition. I think they got around 39%. Now, given that they faced a huge coalition of left or center-left pro-globalist parties, I mean, this election win really does solidify the Nationalist Law and Justice Party is the single most dominant party in Polish politics. It was a great performance for them ahead of their own national elections later on this year, which they should win easily. In addition, the Nationalist Right Party, known as Konfederacja, they pulled off an impressive 6% of the vote, so all combined, the Nationalist Right will have won 26 of Poland's 51 seats in the European Parliament. That's putting them in, I think, 4th of the top 5. As well as Hungary is concerned, no surprise there. Viktor Orban's Fidesz party just ran away with it. And they have won around, I believe, around 55%, 60% of the vote. They're going to get 14 or so of their 21 seats. Next, we just have to give it up for Marine Le Pen's National Rally. I mean, they just beat the pants off of French President Macron's En Marche party quite handily. It was their second European election, that is National Rally, in a row. How do you like them apples? Marine Le Pen is officially dominant. She's 2 for 2 when it comes to EU elections. And so now we're going to see if she can translate that into domestic dominance in French national elections. Now, just this force alone is extremely formidable. Britain, Italy, Poland, and France represent 4 of the 5 largest parties in the European Parliament. So make no mistake, this success alone would be enough to make a very strong impact in Brussels. But in many ways, these 4 nations are just the foundation. Now we're getting to the real growth of the nationalist populist movement at the wider level. And that means we've got to go to Belgium, and particularly Flanders. Flanders is the most populous region in Belgium, and the 2 nationalist right parties in Flanders, the New Flemish Alliance and the Vlaams Belang. Vlaams Belang means Flemish interest. They both came in. They came in 1st and 2nd, respectively. Very, very decisive win there for the right. The Sweden Democrats did very, very well. People have been dissing them a little bit, and I'm getting a little upset. Look at the trajectory. Look at the trends. Back in 2014, the Swedish Democrats got 9% of the vote. They were still in single digits. Yesterday, they got 15% of the vote, which is in line with the 18% they got in their national election. That's what you want. 15% is closing in on doubling their performance from 5 years ago. It's by far their best European election yet. So well done, Sweden Democrats. Same with the Alternative for Germany. They got 11% of the vote, up from 7% in 2014. The conservative New Democracy took over Greece. The prime minister there, Alexis Tsipras, he announced that they're going to have snap elections. The far-left Syriza party, they just collapsed in their support. And keep in mind that New Democracy is considering a coalition with Golden Dawn. Golden Dawn got 2 seats, the Nationalist Populist Party there, in their EU elections, along with the Greek Solution, which is another Nationalist Populist Party. They picked up a seat. And just for time's sake, the Nationalist Populists gained in Estonia, Bulgaria, the Czech Republic, Croatia, Slovenia. And I want to very deliberately include Austria here, okay? I talked about this in the other video. The thing to remember with Austria is that the center-right Austrian People's Party, which did very, very well in the EU elections, even though their government has collapsed, 35% of the vote or so. We have to remember, they basically stole the Nationalist Right Freedom Party's platform in their national election, and they gained 8 percentage points from the 2014 European election, okay? They adopted a nationalist populist platform, and they gained nearly 10 percentage points from the last European election. So I'm including Austria in a growing nationalist populist presence in Europe without apology there. I also want to give a huge shout out to Thierry Baudet's Forum for Democracy in the Netherlands. Now, I know we were all disappointed that they didn't do better, right? We were fully expecting, like with the regional elections there, they were going to win these elections outright, when in the end they did place fourth. So that was rough, that was tough, I admit. But again, if we take our longitudinal analysis here, what do we see? This is a party that didn't even exist a couple of years ago. And they're competing with the Christian Democrats and the Labour Party. So an 11% vote for the first EU election is an extremely impressive showing. The exact same thing goes for the Vox Party in Spain. They're brand new to the political scene, right? They're only just, were they founded 2013? They weren't even a blip on the political map at the last European election, 2014, and they got 6% of the vote. We've gone from 0 to 6% nationalist populism in Spain. Now that's called a trajectory. And it's a movement, and it's a movement towards the nationalist right, not away from it. This was an extraordinary election for the nationalist populist right. Make absolutely no mistake. These trajectories signal to the bullies in Brussels that their days are indeed numbered. A new Europe has, in fact, dawned. A new Europe has, in fact, dawned. A new Europe has, in fact, dawned.
Of the European Union, these populist nationalists, stupid nationalists, they are in love with their own country. Of the European Union, these populist nationalists, stupid nationalists, they are in love with their own country. Of the European Union, these populist nationalists, stupid nationalists, they are in love with their own country.
They are in love with their own country. This is the head of the EU calling the nationalists and populists stupid and giving the impression it is something wrong to be in love with your own country. But this should show you the assortment of parties all over Europe. Some of them just came into existence, and they have astronomically grown in their votes. So much that the EU is now riddled with parties on the right, or populist nationalist parties. Now we know that before Sunday law comes, Europe must swing to the right. Behold, it has happened. We are closer then to a Sunday law. You heard us stand here before this pulpit and tell you over and over that Europe will swing to the right. We told you that here before. Just as how when everybody was telling you that Donald Trump will not win the elections, we singly here said that he would win, and by a landslide. And it so happened. So likewise we told you if you were paying attention, that Europe will swing to the right. And if you have London or England, the UK, swinging so far to the right, within 6 weeks, you really should see how late time is. And this is what people are showing you. Some of you will say, well, what does all this have to do with me? What does it have to do with you? Count down to the Sunday law. That's what it has to do with you. Count down to the Sunday law. That's what happened here. And so we wanted you to see this for yourself, that you would know that what we are facing here is a revolution. It means a lot to you, because to you now, Europe is preparing for a Sunday law. So some people say, well, oh, they just swing to the right. Europe is not going to go back to Catholicism again. Europe is too atheist. They just love sodomy, sleeping with animals, transgenderism, which is against the likeness of God in making man. And so you find people saying that about Europe. Europe will not turn back to religion. So the next video is a shock for you. Pay attention to what you're seeing here. Actually, nationalism goes back to the religion of the nation, the traditional religion of the nation. And the traditional religion of Europe is what? And that's why we present this here to you in this next video. You will see also the Pope and the Vatican is completely on the left. They are against nationalism. You have people going towards the Catholic Church now, and the Pope and his company is against that. One would think they should be glad for that. But one of the persons that might be the future Pope, you will see them in that video here. So we want you to pay attention to this video and see that actually a revival of Roman Catholicism has been taking place in Europe.
Vatican leaders outraged as anti-immigration politician commends Italy to marry. Lisa Bourne of LifeSite News reports that the Catholic Italian politician with whom Pope Francis reportedly refuses to meet because of his immigration stance held and kissed a rosary during a political rally over the weekend and invoked the Blessed Mother, which drew criticism from some quarters and support from others. Deputy Premier and Interior Minister Matteo Salvini also commended his country, its citizens, and himself to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, something unheard of from a Catholic political leader. During a Saturday political rally attended by tens of thousands in Piazza del Duomo in Milan, Salvini appealed to the 6 patron saints of Europe. Salvini then kissed his rosary, looked up to a statue of the Blessed Mother atop the 14th century Milan Cathedral, and said, "I entrust Italy, my life, and your lives to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, whom I'm sure will bring us victory." Salvini led the rally with 10 other populist European leaders ahead of this week's European Parliament elections in a growing resistance to centralized European Union control, and in particular, support for tightening immigration laws. Salvini is a conservative Catholic politician known for prioritizing his country over the European Union, garnering himself the nationalist label by the media. Jesuit Father Antonio Spadaro, a close confidant of Pope Francis, issued several critical tweets, spreading criticism on Facebook as well, saying Christians should be outraged. Vatican Secretary of State, Cardinal Pietro Parolin, issued an apparent rebuke of Salvini as well on Sunday. He said, "I believe partisan politics divides, but God belongs to everyone," Parolin told reporters at the Cathedral of St. John Lateran. Invoking God for oneself is always very dangerous. Brazilian President Bolsonaro signs a proclamation consecrating Brazil to the Virgin Mary. On Tuesday, Brazil was consecrated to the Immaculate Heart of Mary in a ceremony that included President Bolsonaro and Bishop Rifon. The consecration of Brazil, which has more Catholics than any other country, to the Virgin Mary was an initiative of the National Deputy and Brazil's Catholic Parliamentary Front, to ask for divine protection and in reparation for sin. We are doing this for Brazil, for the love of our nation, Biodini was reported as saying. A statue of the Virgin Mary, which depicts her as she appeared to the child visionaries in Fatima, Portugal, was at the ceremony and will remain in a place of honor in the presidential palace. Signing the proclamation of national consecration was President Bolsonaro, his cabinet minister, and Biodini. Participants at the ceremony included various high-level politicians, as well as representatives of various Catholic movements. According to Biodini, this is a simple gesture of faith and love, which is of great importance, not only for Catholics, but for all of Brazil. During the ceremony, participants prayed the rosary and sang a Marian hymn, accompanied by a number of nuns. Sister Kelly Patricia, one of the founders of the Hesed Institute, a Catholic community, sang at the ceremony. According to a statement from the presidential palace, she said, "When it comes to the heart of Mary, it means great things." Bishop Arias said that consecrating his country to the Immaculate Heart means that, quote, Brazil recognizes the presence of God. Pro-life advocates, among them a priest, displayed banners emblazoned with the motto, "Brazil is alive."
Steve Bannon is rejecting the Pope's characterization of populists as racist. In an interview on Fox News Tuesday, Bannon responded to the pontiff's remarks after the major populist wins in the European elections.
The Pope is obviously infallible when he's talking about church doctrine, but when he's talking about politics, he's just dead wrong. And this is, once again, he puts all the onus on the populist nationalist movement. These people are good, decent people. They're not racist. They're not nativist. They're not xenophobes. But the problems, these horrific problems in sub-Saharan Africa and in North Africa cannot be solved by working class people in southern Italy. That's what's been the problem, is that the Pope and the rest of these globalists, this kind of party at Davos, want all the problems to be solved by working class people, and that's what Salvini and Orban are speaking for.
The day after the elections, Pope Francis had made public comments calling populists racist and warning against what he called, quote, signs of meanness.
The Pope celebrated Mass in St. Peter's Basilica.
So you see the opposition of the Pope. Do you see that? When he should be supporting them, he is opposing. But you will also observe, my dear brethren, here, you will also observe that Brazil has swung to the right. And they have consecrated Brazil to Mary. Italy has been consecrated to Mary. A whole set of nations now are being consecrated to Mary, which is a sign of Catholicism reviving in those nations. But we want to let you get a little more shot. Watch on.
Commenced a General Assembly of Caritas Internationalis. Around 164 Caritas representatives from all over the world have come to Rome. The motto for their meetings is one human family, one common home.
That's what Francis is talking about. He's so in bed now with this whole sustainable development crowd, the New World Order crowd, that really it's no wonder that right-wing populist movements won an unprecedented 57 seats in the elections to the European Union's Parliament last week. Oh, did I say populist movements? I meant neo-Nazis and racists, because that's all they are. They're just neo-Nazis and yeah, bad haters, xenophobes. That's all they are. I actually get a kind of a kick out of that. I mean, if that's all the media and the left-wing folks can do is say, you're a racist, you know, when these guys are saying, well, we just want to have our country. We just like to have law and order, you know, reestablished inside of terrible people, racists. Anyway, we'll get into that in a moment. But what's happening here with these populist movements is this is something that traditional Catholics really need to take a look at. Now, I know some of you are going to jump and say, well, they're not Kingship of Christ guys. They're not traditional Latin Mass people. They may have a child out of wedlock here and there. So therefore, we, you know, the purists, we disqualify all of them. And I'm sort of flummoxed by that, because traditional Catholics of all people, I mean, for 50 years we've been saying that the Catholic Church has dropped the ball, that Catholic priests no longer talk about mortal sin from the pulpit. They don't stress, you know, confession, all of it. So why on earth would we be surprised when certain, you know, politicians in Europe are not exactly daily communicants? They know something's wrong. They know that there's this, they sense this sort of rise of this very anti-Christian New World Order thing, and they're trying to do something about it. So traditional Catholics of all people should be looking at this movement, this populist movement, and saying, you know what, there's some things there we can work with. They're coming in the right direction. Yeah, they need the kingship of Christ. Yes, they need the restoration of the Catholic Church. But their instincts are right. Their instincts are Catholic. And right there in the Pope's own backyard now, you have this Matteo Salvini, who we'll get into in a moment, but he reminds me of like a William Wallace of Italy or something, a Braveheart. And now his Lega party got a whopping 30%. This sent a clear message, not only to Brussels, but to Pope Francis. You know, that the sellout, the Vatican's sellout to the New World Order is scaring the literal hell out of the Italian people. And more than just scaring them, it's ticking them off. They're angry. They're tired of it. And as well they should be. And anyone who's ever traveled in Italy, you're not really surprised by this. You scratch the surface just a little bit of the Italian people, society, and the Catholicism is right there. It's in the roots of that country, of course. The churches are still standing. The people want something to believe in. It's only because of Vatican II and the whole mess over there that so many of them have fallen away. It's not going to take that much to get them back, and I think the populist movement is proving that. People, they do want more. They do want identity. They do want Christianity. They want their countries back. That's not racism. That's called survival. That's called wanting something to believe in. And this Salvini guy, I find him very interesting. He's described in a new article on remnantnewspaper.com by our remnant columnist in Italy, my good friend Hilary White. She describes him as the man the Bergoglian and Italian bishops most love to hate. It's a fascinating new article, by the way, on the site right now, so please check that out. Italian journalist Antonio Socci, he tweeted that the elections now, these recent elections, have a certain winner, which is obviously Matteo Salvini, who has been bitterly opposed, according to Socci, by the Italian Bishops' Conference. So the Catholic people of Italy now, according to Socci, the Catholic people have rejected Pope Bergoglio and the Italian bishops by this populist vote. Again, plenty of reason for traditional Catholics to sit up and pay attention. Something interesting is happening here. And the difference now between us, our movement, and this populist movement is that they do have some political clout. They do have some power to do something. They have sort of a political strategy that's beginning to work, that's got Brussels nervous, that's got the Vatican nervous. And what do they need? They need the kingship of Christ. They need the traditional Catholic sort of injection, and we need to restore the church as well as have these populist movements. And the world could change. Europe could change tomorrow if this begins to really take root, and there's reason to think that maybe it is. Because there are similar political parties now, populist parties, springing up all over the place. So you have it happening in Spain, you have it in Hungary, in Spades. We're going to be going to Hungary in a few weeks, 2 weeks. And I'm really curious to see how that's going to play out, what it's like in Hungary now as you have sanity being restored in Hungary. Again, racism being obviously institutionalized in Hungary if you're watching CNN. But for the rest of us, we're seeing sanity being restored in these countries. Hungary, Poland, Austria, even the Brexit party in the UK. Farage, what's his first name? Nigel Farage. I get a kick out of this guy. Again, he's not a kingdom of Christ guy, not yet anyway, but he sees, he senses instinctively that something is really wrong with the EU. He's trying to do something about it. This is interesting for us as traditional Catholics, especially, again, since the only answer so far that these guys at the far left in politics and in media, the only answer so far is that they're a bunch of racists. And I really think most people are seeing through that by now. I mean, this racism charge, it's just an insult hurled by unimaginative people that don't have an argument. And that's fairly apparent to most people. It's not a real argument. It's the ultimate ad hominem. You know, you're a racist because you don't agree with it. You either go along with the open borders insanity or you're a racist. It's just so silly. It's so stupid. And I think most people now are really not too bothered by it. And I think we as traditional Catholics shouldn't be either. We shouldn't be cowed by this or intimidated by this. Well, if you say anything nice about the populist movement, you probably are a Nazi or a... Come on. Stop it. Pope Francis now, and this is where it gets kind of scary, though, when it comes to this, rather than trying to bring people together, the Pope also now is saying that people who are interested in preserving their own culture and protecting their own borders, he says they're racist and they're probably anti-Semitic. This is absolutely irresponsible on his part.
Chiesa ha ammonito le persone, i popoli e I governi riguardo alle deviazioni di questo attaccamento quando verte in esclusione e odio altrui, quando diventa nazionalismo conflittuale che alza muri, anzi addirittura razzismo o antisemitismo.
Pope Francis invited countries to collaborate with one another. He encouraged them not to see immigrants as a threat, but instead welcome, protect, promote, and integrate them into society.
In France, by the way, Holiness, those same immigrants took over Terminal 2 at Charles de Gaulle International Airport the other night and literally grounded airplanes by refusing to leave until they got free citizenship cards from the government of France. What's going on here? The French are literally losing their country. And to a large extent, it's their own fault. 100 years ago, 200 years ago, they declared war on Christ the King. They thought they could be liberated and equal and fraternal and all that stuff. Well, I don't think they realized that what that meant. You get rid of Christ from Catholic France, and you are going to end up with no France at all. And that's what's happening. They're literally losing their country. Thus, President Macron's embarrassing loss then to Marine Le Pen, the national movement there in France on Sunday. Even people who are just concerned about the mayhem and the rioting in the streets and the burning churches and everything else, that's enough for a lot of people to say, yes, something has to give here. We need to stop the policies of this nascent new world order called the European Union, which is destroying these countries in Europe. And it's not just in Europe. It's the same now in the Philippines, a country that's dominated by...
You see, even the Philippines gave themselves over to Mary. Even the Philippines. And if you listen to what the man was saying, he is speaking about France removing the reign of Christ. He's talking about the French Revolution, where the papacy was wounded. And he's calling for restoration. So these Catholics are actually calling for the temporal reign of the Pope to be reinstated, which is what will happen with a Sunday law. Already the political grounds for it is being laid. And now the Philippines have actually legislated the worship of Mary. Watch this.
What, Planned Parenthood, the population controllers, the sustainable development, all the usual suspect, the secularists. And all of a sudden, the Philippines Congress passed a bill declaring September 8th, the Feast of the Nativity of the Blessed Virgin Mary, a national holiday in the Philippines. And by the way, it's not just sort of, the Virgin Mary or something. It's specifically Our Lady of Fatima. Moving on down then, South America, you have Brazil, same thing going on. Last Tuesday, Brazil was consecrated to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. I can't even believe that we're able to report on some of this stuff. Just when you thought, and we've been saying this for a long time, you think it's over and it's gone, never count God out, never count the Blessed Mother out. This is what we've been waiting for, and it's beginning to happen. It's not perfect, it's not all the way there, but it's beginning to happen. Brazil consecrated to the Immaculate Heart of Mary? This is extremely significant. Take a look at some of this.
Senhoras e senhores, o presidente da República, Jair Bolsonaro, acompanhado do ministro-chefe da Secretaria-Geral da Presidência da República, Floriano Peixoto Vieira Neto, do deputado federal Eros Biondini, de Dom Terra, bispo emérito de Brasília, de Dom Fernando Rifan, bispo da Administração Apostólica São João Maria Vianney.
Iniciemos este ato em nome do Pai, do Filho, do Espírito Santo. Salve, Senhora. Queremos te colocar em primeiro lugar agora aqui nos nossos corações e no Brasil. Ave Maria, cheia de graça, o Senhor é convosco. Bendita sois vós entre as mulheres, do vosso ventre, Jesus. Santa Maria, Mãe de Deus, rogai por nós, pecadores, agora e na hora de nossa morte. Amém. Podem assentar, obrigado. Que tenha a honra da vitória final, a última grande e espetacular vitória que nos dará os novos céus e a nova terra, O triunfo do Imaculado Coração de Maria, que é a vitória de Jesus Cristo para o mundo novo. E viva Nossa Senhora Rainha do Brasil!
And by the way, do you recognize that bishop? Well, that bishop is the successor of the late, great Bishop Antonio de Castro Mayer, the only bishop in the world to publicly stand with Archbishop Lefebvre in 1988. And his diocese then, down in Campos, in Brazil, refused, was the only diocese in the world that diocese-wide refused to offer the new Mass. And now here's Bishop Rafan, the successor of Castro Mayer, who still heads up a now regularized, but nevertheless traditionalist society, which offers only the traditional Latin Mass. He's a traditionalist. And there he is, down in Brazil with the politicians, with the president, consecrating Brazil to the Blessed Mother of God. It's incredible. And again, the statue that we see in the video is a statue, not just some generic, Virgin Mary, but again, Our Lady of Fatima, who back in 2017, by the way, found her way into the Trump White House after a Maronite priest was called in to exorcise the White House, which is a story in and of itself, which we should probably look into. Why did Trump want to have the White House exorcised from demonic spirits when he got in? Very interesting. But anyway, he called the priest to come in and do that. The priest brought a statue of Our Lady of Fatima, and Trump, the president of the United States, asked if he could keep that statue of Our Lady of Fatima. So right now, there's a statue of Our Lady of Fatima at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. People say, it's just Trump. It's just a political stunt. Really? Since when is a statue of Our Lady of Fatima in the hands of the president, of the leader of the free world? Since when is that a political opportunity? So again, going back into Italy, when Italy's deputy premier, this Matteo Salvini, when he dedicated his country to the Immaculate Heart of Mary at a rally attended by tens of thousands of people, and he says, quote, I entrust Italy, my life, and your lives to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, who I'm sure will bring us to victory.
E io personalmente affido l'Italia, la mia e la vostra vita, al cuore immacolato di Maria, che son sicuro ci porterà alla vittoria.
Friends, there's no way that we can look at something like this and say, it's just politics, it doesn't mean anything. This is a baptized Catholic saying this in front of the whole world. But he wasn't done. He goes on to say, quote, we entrust ourselves to the 6 patrons of Europe, to St. Benedict of Norcia, to St. Bridget of Sweden, to St. Catherine of Siena, to St. Cyril and Methodius, to St. Teresa Benedetta of the Cross. We rely on them, and we entrust to them the destiny, the future, the peace, and the prosperity of our peoples.
La pace e la prosperità dei nostri popoli.
Now, when's the last time you heard Pope Francis say anything even remotely like that? You see why they don't like this man at the Vatican? Because he's more Catholic than the Pope, evidently. Now, again, this man, Salvini, he's not a saint, but he's a baptized Catholic who knows instinctively that contrary to all the propaganda of the globalists and the secularists who now dominate Europe, he knows that the people, they are missing something. They want something back. Yes, they want their countries, but they also want their God back. They want Christianity. They want devotion to the Blessed Mother again. They want their Christian identity back. And so even if it is just politics, that's great news that people are beginning to win political elections in countries of former Christendom by appealing to Christian roots, by appealing to the Mother of God. Even if it's a political stunt, it means the people it's resonating with the people. They're responding to it. Don't you see? It's not all lost. It's not all hopeless. The faith is not gone from Europe. It's been camouflaged, covered up, and buried by the Second Vatican Council and the revolutionaries, the modernists in the church, but it's still there in the people. And this election, this populist election now, proves it in Italy. Of course Salvini's no saint, but neither was Constantine when God used him to bring about the fall of the mighty Roman Empire. Remember? He wasn't a saint. Neither was Cyrus the Great of Persia, the pagan whom God used to free his peoples from Babylonian captivity. The pagan. Neither was François de Charette de la Contrie in France, the great leader of the uprising in the Vendée. You know what? That man had some concubines early on in his life. He was an extremely lukewarm Catholic. He fought on the side of the Americans in the Revolutionary War, didn't quite get the whole Enlightenment thing at first. And when Catholic peasants, French peasants in the Vendée, when they pressed him, he was hiding under his bed. He wanted nothing to do with the Catholic counter-revolution. But they pressed him. And finally, his Catholic instincts won out. And he stood up to the challenge. And he led the Royal and Catholic Army in France against the revolution in Paris. He answered the call. And he would eventually go on to die a martyr's death, a hero for Catholic France, for the altar and throne of the Catholic Church. So similarly now, some of these men, such as Salvini, they're broken, broken vessels, yeah. But nevertheless, they're kicking against the same Antichrist that was dominating in Paris in 1789. And yet what happens with our Pope, our vaunted Pope at this moment, when you finally have a politician, a political movement in Catholic Europe, formerly Catholic Europe, finally they're calling on the Mother of God, they're holding up the rosary, they're showing the world what the answer is. And what does Pope Francis do? He refuses to meet with these men. He refused to meet with Salvini. He'll meet with almost anybody, Francis will. He met with rock star Bono, absolutely, no problem. Italy's famed abortion advocate, Bonino, oh, sure, absolutely. Pro-abort Vice President Joe Biden, you bet. Francis met with him. But a Catholic politician who's now entrusted Italy to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, and Francis's response is, quote, until his language and politics change, I can't and I don't want to shake Salvini's hand. Why? Because Salvini is hated by the Marxists in Europe. And guess what? Breitbart News got it right the other night when they said, quote, Marxists really have infiltrated the church hierarchy all the way to the very top. And they're in no position whatsoever to come out and condemn the populist movement. That whatever their flaws are, this populist movement, they have had enough of the New World Order. And the Vatican shall not, will not, must not be allowed to stand in their way as the moral authority, accusing them of racism and horrible, ugly things that are in no sense true or accurate. Because this is it, friends. Because the Freemasons and the globalists and whatever you want to call them now, the New World Orders, they've uncrowned Christ. And a long time ago, their forefathers beheaded the kings and queens of Christendom. And now they're trying to create a global concentration camp out of Catholic Europe. And somebody's going to stop them. And these movements are trying to do just that. Traditional Catholics cannot sit this out. We need to bring the standard of Christ the King into the populist movements in Europe, South America, wherever they happen, even here in America, to help to undermine the anti-Christian movement. Again, populism is not enough. The people must crown Christ again too. But we need to start somewhere. And that's where traditional Catholics need to come in, need to wisen up, need to adopt a strategy that's going to help this movement. Don't be bullied by the media, desperate now to paint us all as racist, to paint everybody who's got a problem with what's going on as racist. Don't be intimidated by that. That's just the last recourse of atheist politicians who are losing control of the situation. Because again, Europe is Catholic. Christ is in the foundations of the nations of Europe. Christ is in the bones of the people, of the European people, even still, even today.
Parliamentary elections in the EU this week saw nationalists gaining ground over long dominant centrist parties. Liberal and Green parties also made headway against the centrists, causing some to fear that populism and anti-immigrant sentiment is gaining ground in Europe, particularly in the UK, France, and Italy, where nationalists won the most seats at the EU. Pope Francis took the occasion to push back against populism by once again defending migration, saying the signs of meanness we see around us heighten our fear of the other, the foreigner, end quote. Here with his thoughts on this and more is the former head of the Vatican's highest court, the Apostolic Signatura, and one of the world's foremost canon lawyers. He is also one of the 4 cardinals who posed the dubia to Pope Francis regarding his Amoris Laetitia. Please welcome Cardinal Raymond Burke, who joins us from Rome. Your Eminence, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Raymond.
Look,
I'm pleased to be with you.
The EU Parliament elections this week saw major gains for populists across Europe, especially Farage's party in the UK, Salvini in Italy. Pope Francis has been very critical of populism before and after the EU elections. The former head of the CDF, Cardinal Gerhard Müller, had some thoughts on the Pope's view of populism. He said this week, "A church authority cannot speak in such an amateur way about theological questions, and especially it must not intrude into politics when there is a democratically legitimized parliament and government as there is in Italy. It's better to talk with Salvini, discuss or correct him when necessary. It's curious that the Pope has received the most secularist people and not Salvini. He dialogues with the Venezuelan regime or with China, which places millions of Christians in re-education camps, destroys churches, persecutes Christians." End quote. Your Eminence, is Mueller correct here? Is the Pope inserting himself into a political debate rather than engaging as a shepherd with these political figures that perhaps he could win over in a different way?
Yes, we have to take our direction here from what has been the constant practice of the Church, following our Lord's own words, "Render unto Caesar what is Caesar, and unto God what is God's." And the Church is never right to mix itself directly into political action, while at the same time, in order to carry out her mission, she has to pronounce herself with regard to moral questions of politics. In other words, when politics are offending against the dignity of the human person, or against the fundamental right to life, or against the integrity of marriage, or whatever it may be, the Church has to speak out, and that's our role. With regard to this whole question of populism, patriotism is in fact part of the natural moral law. It's in the fourth commandment that we owe. The first three commandments are reverence to God. Then the rest of the commandments begin with the reverence we owe to our parents, to our family, and to our homeland in which a family is able to exist and to grow and develop. And this has always been part of the teaching of the Church. You will also find it in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. This is this kind of, and then to use the word nationalism, which is a red flag word, it conjures up thoughts of the abuse of the loyalty to one's homeland for some kind of totalitarian purpose. But there is a genuine patriotism which requires, for instance, with regard to the question of immigration, which requires a nation to, yes, we have to take in those who are real refugees, those who have nowhere to go. But on the other hand, the church has never taught that a nation should engage in indiscriminate immigration, which is neither good for the nation itself, to the extent that it may not be able to handle all of those who are migrating, and at the same time, it's not good for the nation of origin of all of those who are leaving their homeland, when they should be staying there to devote themselves to their homeland. And the only reason given when we must accept someone who comes to our borders is that they aren't able to have a livelihood in their homeland. They're not able to have in their homeland those things which they need to live. And so this is, but these are very delicate questions, and we need to dialogue with Vice Premier Matteo Salvini, with others, about this question.
Your Eminence, you yourself came under fire for comments regarding the regulation of Muslim immigration when you said not long ago, Muslims have said that they are able today to accomplish what they were not able to accomplish in the past with armaments, because Christians no longer are ready to defend their faith, what they believe. They are no longer ready to defend the moral law. Limiting large-scale immigration, Muslim immigration, is in fact, as far as I'm concerned, a responsible exercise of one's patriotism. Why did you say that? Your critics are saying you're broad-brushing an entire population of people.
No, I'm not at all. And I'm not an Islamophobe. I respect Islam for what it is. But I'm saying to to my fellow countrymen and to other people of goodwill, you must recognize and respect Islam for what it is. And Islam is a form of government. And you can ask the most specific Muslim who's living in any country, if you ask him, when you become a majority of the population, must you impose Sharia, the Islamic law, on the whole nation? And if he's a true Muslim, he'll have to tell you yes, because that's the nature of the religion. I don't say this to stir up hatred or a negative reaction to Muslims, but simply to say we need to recognize Islam for what it is, to respect its integrity. And so if a nation indiscriminately welcomes so many Muslims who are also going to have children, many children, which is a good thing. I very much respect the love for the family in Islam. They will become the majority of the population, and at that moment they will be obliged by their religious faith. They will be obliged to impose that government on the whole population and Sharia, that law. That's all I'm saying. But people, everybody wants to right away get involved in accusations, you're a racist, you're an Islamophobe, and so forth. I'm just asking, let's be reasonable about this, and let's talk to each other in a reasonable way.
Your Eminence, Pope Francis regularly says that it's imperative to follow the biblical command of welcoming the stranger. This week, in that Mexican interview, he chimed in again on U.S. immigration policy and the Trump wall. He said this: "We knew of one, of Berlin, and the many headaches and sufferings it caused us. But it appears that man does what animals don't, right? Man is the only animal that falls twice into the same hole, right? We are returning to the same thing, right? Building walls as if it were a defense, right? Defense is dialogue, growth, acceptance, and education, integration." Your Eminence, is a wall on a border immoral?
No, not at all. A wall on a border could serve some very good function to keep good order between two sovereign states, which is the case of Mexico and the United States. Here we're not talking about a totalitarian regime as was the case with the building of the Berlin Wall. They're two distinct cases. And whether you agree or do not agree that a wall is the best way to do it, the wall can legitimately represent a way of carrying out responsible immigration. And that's to say, I don't agree that it's an inherently immoral act to put up a wall.
Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the Liberals sink to a new low in their polling just 6 months before their national election. That's what we'll be talking about on today's video. And what we're going to do is we're going to look specifically at the astonishing shift to the right that's been occurring throughout Canada over the last year. A shift that appears ready to kick Trudeau and the Liberals out of Ottawa for good. So there is some new polling out there, and it continues to be dire for the ultra-liberal Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. All right, you ready for this? Okay. According to the most recent Ledger poll, just 27% of respondents said that they would vote for Trudeau and his Liberal Party. That's a stunning 13 points behind the Conservatives. The Conservatives lead in every single region in Canada except Quebec. But now, 40% approval, that's like considered popular in light of the most recent poll numbers that now have Trudeau falling under 30%. So he's just in a polling free fall for now. And it doesn't look good for Trudeau in terms of him being able to recover for the national elections. And that's largely because while all of the scandals going on, even before it all started, Canada began to move very noticeably to the political right. And that all started in last summer's Ontario elections. Ontario is Canada's largest province. And to the astonishment of many, it was Doug Ford, who's often been dubbed as Canada's Trump. It was Ford who won the election overwhelmingly as Premier of Ontario. His party absolutely trounced the Liberal Party by winning 76 out of 124 seats in the provincial legislature, which is over 60% of the parliamentary seats. And keep in mind, too, Ford ran on a totally anti-Trudeau platform, anti-elite, anti-politically correct, very, very populist. Again, Ford is often likened to Donald Trump in terms of his style and his politics. And then shortly thereafter, shortly after Ontario, in October, you had the Quebec elections, where voters turned to the conservative Coalition Avenir Québec, the CAQ party, which is the increasingly nationalist, populist party of Quebec. And their victory effectively ended 15 years of Liberal rule over the province.
Did you hear that, my dear brethren? Are you shocked? And he said populism was not enough. They need to crown what? Christ. That is to restore the papacy's temporal reign over the nations, which they lost in 1798. And this is where Europe is going. Europe has swung to the right. Even Canada now has swung to the right. Even Canada. By the way, did you know that about 2 to 3 weeks ago, Australia swung to the right too? Yes. So what do you have here? Let's just go to the chart now, after this. Let's just go to the chart. What we have taking place in the world today, while the media is calling it populism and far-right, far-right people, what we actually have is what? Nationalism. What do we have? Nationalism. You remember the Prime Minister of Trinidad said that he was a nationalist. So this is what we have. We have nationalism in those countries. They are against globalism or the New World Order or the communist New World Order. By going back to nationalism, this is what they are doing. Nationalism is the resurrection of a nation's interest. Are you listening to me here? It is a nation seeking what? Survival and what? Autonomy from global control. That is what nationalism is. Nationalism also is rediscovering what they would call what? National Catholicism in their bones. And that's where religion is coming back. Europe has swung back to Catholicism. And they are calling now for the re-establishment of papal rule. The temporal reign of the papacy. That's what they are calling for. You see, nationalism is Europe rediscovering their what? Christian identity. And what does that mean? That a Sunday law is to come. Did you get that, my dear brethren? Did you get that? This is exactly what is going on here. Now quickly, because we will finish in a short while. What is slanderously, next chart. What is slanderously and in a derogatory way called far-right or populism or nationalism? It is really people seeking to preserve their national identity and homeland from destruction by globalists, internationalists, racial replacement, immigration, and cultural change. That's what they are seeking to do. Because the replacement immigration involves religions and religious ethics change by anti-rights and freedoms legislation against the wishes of the majority of people, the nationalist struggle of the people involves confirming nationalist cultural values and traditional religion among the people in Europe is Roman Catholicism. So you find a large amount of Muslims are coming in, and they are raping little girls, trying to marry 8-year-old girls. Catholicism finds that reprehensible. So people are turning back to the Catholic Church and rejecting that kind of religious ethics as barbaric. And to go back to Catholicism, they will have to go back to the mark that the Catholic Church left in its past rule over Europe. And what mark was that? Sunday exaltation. Here is the Catholic record of London, Ontario, Canada, September the 1st, 1923. I quote, "Sunday is our mark of authority." Did you see that? Father Enright, CSSR, Redemptive College, Kansas, quote, "No, keep the first day of the week, and lo, the entire civilized world bows in reverence obedience to the command of the Holy Catholic Church. It is the mark of our authority to overrule God's law." End of quote. That's what they are saying. And you see, my dear brethren, the move towards nationalism, as expressed in the recent European Union election, is inadvertently a move towards a future Sunday law. That's what we are facing. So watch me. Populism or nationalism? Whatever you choose to call it. It is a revolt to preserve what? National identity. To preserve what? National homeland. It is a revolt against what? Internationalist, racial replacement immigration. They're trying to replace the white people of Europe by people from sub-Saharan Africa and the Middle East. So it is replacement immigration. You have people living on the streets, they know where to live. They're just living in parks and on the streets and in the bush. There's so much of them there. And although that is seen to be happening, the government is just allowing them to come with open borders to change the racial makeup of Europe. So populism or nationalism is a revolt to preserve what? Cultural identity. It is a revolt to preserve what? Traditional religious ethics. It is a revolt to preserve traditional what? European what? Religion, which is what? Roman Catholicism, which has to take what? Sunday exaltation. That's what you are facing. That's what's going on. That's what it's all about. You see, my dear brethren, a future Sunday law for Europe then is a law for national salvation. That's how they are viewing it. A Sunday law for them is a law for national salvation and preservation. It is a law for the very survival of Europe as a homogeneous entity. It is to save Europe itself. So could you imagine you are going to speak against a Sunday law? Could you imagine that? Let me tell you something. That move towards nationalism, which they call the right in Europe, is a move towards national survival. Did you get that clear, my dear brethren? Are you listening? Hence, whosoever opposes the coming Sunday law will in fact be seen as opposing the very survival of Europe as a cultural people. Thus, he will be met with the most bitterest and fanatical oppositions by the nationalists and their governments. So that's what's facing us now. As we make a swing towards the right, the revolution is happening right before your eyes. How do you appreciate it? Whatever reasons dissenting Christians will present, even the keeping of the seventh-day Sabbath of Yahweh thy God, according to the commandments of God. They will be opposed by the nationalist people and popularists as the enemy of the people and the potential destroyer of European civilization. They will call you a destroyer of European civilization. When A.T. Jones opposed a Sunday law in 1888, he was called by evangelicals then the destroyer of America because he wanted the atheists to get through. And so they will call us the destroyers of European civilization by aiding the globalists and the Islamic conquest by immigration of the European nations. They wouldn't study what the Bible says, that the seventh day is the Sabbath of Yahweh thy God. No. But at least when a Sunday law is coming, here is a time and there is a pattern to introduce the truth to Europe. And let me tell you this. Now that Europe is swinging to the right, there is a pattern to introduce the truth to Europe. Next slide. That pattern to introduce the truth to Europe already exists in this church. In this church, there is a philosophical and theological position that will introduce the truth of the seventh-day Sabbath back to Europe with justification by faith. It already exists here. So not only is the way being open for Sunday law, the way is being open for the real gospel to reach them. And that's why you have to prepare for it. It's time to stop this weakness, this weak doctrinal learning, this laziness, this weak morality, this constant being caught up in other things. Now and then you're for Christ, now and then you're for other things. It's time for true, full, genuine dedication. Because the end is coming. As Europeans swing to the right. Remember, the Bible clearly tells us, there remaineth therefore a keeping of the Sabbath to the world, people of God. Remember, the Bible tells us that. And you have to find a way from these truths in the Bible to reach Europe. Amen. But with the current move towards Catholicism, the way is now being open to you to preach the truth to them. Amen. You remember when the hordes of Muslims coming in Europe, they don't know to defend Christianity because they wasn't even following that. Now for the first time they are waking back up to Christianity but to the Catholic brand. Now the way is being open for you to spread the truth to them. Do you see that? That's right. So you see, my dear brethren, we must remember that before the Sunday law comes, there must be the American false prophet Protestantism. They must do demonic miracles in America. And that must establish Protestant communion. So once Protestant communion is established, then they will be able to legislate what? Sunday exaltation. And that causes what? Papal worship. But no Protestant want to have papal worship with this kind of pope. Europe has already gone right. All you need now is to get rid of the pope. Are you listening to me? And once a new pope, more for traditional Catholic religion is there, who is seeking to save the world from globalism, not pushing globalism, but who is seeking to save the world from globalism and Europe from its destruction. Once a new pope like that comes into power, the evangelicals in America will be able to support him. with demonic miracles, with setting up an image to the beast, an image like the beast, Protestant communism, a political system that enables the United States to legislate what? Sunday exaltation. You see, this is the future. This is where everything goes. This is what is going to happen. And we are seeing the movements being directed towards it. Are you listening to me, my dear brethren? I know some of you, and this is new to some of you, and you cannot appreciate much of what is being said here. But let me tell you this. If there is any evidence you have, is to see godless Europe now shifting towards Catholicism. For two reasons. You to give them the final message, but also to enable Sunday to be passed as a law, a day which exalts the papacy. You want to know, why are you always talking about a Sunday law and papal exaltation? You must remember, the war that Lucifer started in heaven continued where? On the earth. And it was a war for Lucifer to be exalted as God with God. Remember he said, I will be like the what? Most High. The only office on earth that properly represents what Lucifer wanted in heaven when he thought to be God with God is what? The papal office. And that's why for Lucifer, if he could only exalt that office, he will get glory. That's how your Bible puts it. Look at Revelation 13 quickly. Revelation 13. We read verse 2. Now I'm just giving a brief account here. Verse 2. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon, which we were told in chapter 12, is the devil. And the dragon gave him his seat, his power, and what? Great authority. Did you see that? So those different beasts make up the papal beast. Because the papal beast received this teaching from those ancient nations. So they make up the papal beast. But the devil gave his seat to the papacy. What is Lucifer's seat according to Ezekiel 28 verse 2? Sitting in the seat of God is saying, I will be what? Like the Most High. And that seat, we are told, was given from the devil to the papacy. And that seat, once the papacy has this seat, and you obey the papacy, which is obedience worship, you are in effect saying that Lucifer is God with God. You're worshiping the dragon. That's how your Bible puts it. Let's read. It says this, verse 4. And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast. Did you see that? So once you worship the beast, which is papal worship, who are you worshiping? Who are you worshiping? And worshiping the dragon is saying that he's God with God. This is, Lucifer has found what we call a technical, political intrigue to get human beings to join his side of the argument. To get human beings to say what he was saying from the beginning. What he got Adam and Eve to do. Oh, you can take of the fruit, you know, because the day you eat it, your eyes shall be what? Open, and you shall be as God, knowing good and evil. Not replace God, but as God. And it's that same seat that Lucifer sits in that the Pope holds. So if you, for whatever reason, submit to the law of the land for Sunday exaltation against Yahweh's Sabbath, what do you think you are doing? You're exalting the papacy, because that's their mark. And when you exalt the papacy, whom do you think you will be exalting? Lucifer. So through those technical step-down intrigue, Lucifer will still get people to finally declare what he tried to do in heaven, that he's God with God. But you and I will say, no, there is one God. Verily, verily, Yahweh said, what my Sabbath he shall, for it is a sign that you may know that I am what? Yahweh, your God. That's why you're supposed to stand for the Sabbath. Do you see that, my dear brethren? Thus, any pope, next shot. Thus, any pope or papacy that opposes the current growth of nationalism as racist, as the Pope said, will be looked upon as being inimical to the interests and glory of the Catholic Church and will be vehemently resisted. The Pope is being resisted. It means that the current reign of the left promoting Pope Francis will have to come at an end, or you will have to change to the right. Recently, the Pope tried a trick. After telling people, give up all the traditions, which we read here for you. Do you know what he went and say on the news? I'm a conservative. So people start to say, who could believe you anymore again? You're trying that old Jesuit tactic. You put one position out, you put another position out, but the position that have the force wins. And anybody points you out and say, but look, you said give up tradition. You could always point and say, I'm a conservative. That's an old trick. So the days of the Pope are numbered. So the EU, the European Union political status is a swing to the right, which is what? Nationalism. It means to say they are exalting what? Papal, traditional, national culture. Praying to Mary, worshiping Mary. You see nations have already been dedicated to Mary. That's Catholic traditional culture. They're going back there. That means that there is a coming what? Sunday legislation. And exactly what the Bible tells you will happen to the papacy before its final destruction is what is coming. The papacy's temporal rule is to be what? Re-established. Therefore getting rid of the wounded. The deadly wound being healed. Here is the papacy with the deadly wound healed. Revelation 17. Verse 18. We read. It says this. And after these things, I saw another angel come down from heaven. Verse 18, of chapter 17. It says this. And the woman which thou sawest, that's the papacy. Notice this. And the woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the what? Kings of the earth. For the papacy or the Vatican City to rule over the kings of the earth, it must be a temporal reign. And it will happen. It will happen. The papacy's temporal rule is to be re-established. That's where this whole thing is leading. We have warned you about this because we wanted you to prepare for the end, which is swiftly coming. Let's look at our final chart here. You say, Brother Medina, what do I need to prepare? Whether you're small as a child, whether you now come here in this church building, or whether you have been here for a long time. The question is, what do you need to do to prepare? What do you need? This chart simply presents it here. But this chart has a lot of depth in it. Plenty depth and scripture in it. Although it is this simple. Let me give you one example. Turn to James 5, verse 8. James 5 and verse 8. James chapter 5, verse 8 in your Bible. Did you see that wonderful truth here in James? Why do you think this is written in James chapter 5 and verse 8? Because 1 to 7 speaks about the globalist international bankers in James. And at the time when the globalist international bankers are doing their wickedness, God calls for us to be patient this week. Watch what he says. Verse 8. I quote. Be ye also what? What to do? Establish your heart, for the coming of Yahweh, joy now. Did you see that? So we are told you are called upon to be patient. The word patient there is not a proper word to use in biblical things. The better word is endurance. That's the actual Greek endurance. We're being told to have endurance. I am sure you know you fail when you don't enjoy defeat. We are sure you know you fail when you do not endure in the faith. Your own peculiar little reasons in your own environment or in your own mind or in your own situation, it always boils down to lacking endurance. And do you know when you don't enjoy the truth, what do? You hinder your own mind from being what? Established in the faith. Because if you endure, your mind will become what? Established. Did you see that? Remember Revelation 14:12? Amen. Amen. And what does Revelation 14:12 tell you? Here is the what? Endurance of the saints. Here are they that what? Keep the commandments of God and the what? Faith of Jesus. Endurance is keeping the faith in your heart. Keeping the commandments of God in your life. Which means to say, you don't give up. Look at the reading here. Endurance, establishing the heart through the faith or revealed truths, dealing with temptation and what? Infirmities. So when the faith or the revealed truth deals with temptation that comes to you, how you face the temptation will determine if you are enduring. How you face the temptation will determine if you are what? Establishing your heart in the truth. And so with infirmities in your body, so with infirmities. Because you need to face the infirmities with faith. Some they just weary and they don't study the Bible. Some just weary and they just forget Christianity for a while. And as a result of that, they allow infirmities to take their mind away from the faith. And therefore they do not establish your heart. So this is why you're being asked upon to number one. The current moral need for every one of us here is endurance. It is establishing the heart through the faith or revealed truth of God, dealing with temptation and infirmity. Now there are scriptures here we can go through, but our time is past. But I will give you one last scripture. Let's see faith making you endure and establishing your heart. Hebrews chapter 11, 36 to 39. Hebrews chapter 11, 36 to 39. And then we'll move on. We are told, and others had trial of cruel mockings and scourging, yea, moreover, of bonds and imprisonment. So they beat you, they mock you, they throw them in jail, they tie them up. What did they do? Did they give up and say, okay, I give up Christianity? No. Through faith, they did what? Endure. What does that do? Establish your heart. Let's read on. Verse 37. They were stoned. They were sawn asunder, like Isaiah. Were tempted. Were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, and tormented. Could you imagine that? Rather than wear normal clothes, they had to run with sheepskin and goatskin. No place to lay their head. And they'd rather take all of that than deny Christ. And some people here, for the slightest pressure, they give up and lose their temper. For the slightest pressure, they give up and do something wrong. Some of us here. And these people were with animal skins wandering all over the place, facing pressure, and rather death than transgress. They rather death than transgress. What kind of weak generation are we? We've been so far away from Christ that we have a whole bunch of us as weak people, more big mouth than big life. That's how we have been. But you need to change, because change is coming in the world. We have stood here over and over and declared to you these things that were about to happen. Now you are seeing it with your own eyes. We try to help you appreciate it by showing it to you here. Sometimes it is kind of boring to listen to these people talk. But if you look by faith, you see what's going on behind the scenes. What we just try to do is to share our vision to you, that you would see what we saw. That we're close to the end. And we got to prepare fast. Are you listening to me, my dear brother? Let's just read out the text and finish it. Verse 38. Of whom the world was not worthy. So the world was not worthy of such people. They may be a vagrant because they can't find good clothes and a place to stay. But they kept the faith. The world is not even worthy of them. They are by far much more higher than this world. We are told of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and in mountains and in dens and caves of the earth. And these all have obtained a what? Hey, hold on. When I say these all received a good report, And you're going to answer the other part, put in the word the before faith, because it is in the Greek text. When you reply, it says, and these all having obtained a good report, what? Receive not the promise of God. They have to wait. They went in the grave dead. They didn't go to heaven. They waited. They're waiting for us. But they trusted. They believed. They held the faith. Are you listening to me? Even though they didn't receive the reward yet. Unless we know. God having provided some better thing for us, that they without us should not be made perfect. In other words, should not be made completed. So in other words, they have to wait for us in these last days. That all of us, they and us, will all be a complete, perfect body in Christ Jesus. And that is speaking about the resurrection. Last verse, chapter 10, verse 13. Chapter 10, verse 39. Verse 38 and 39. Now the just shall live by faith. But if any man will draw back, that is lack patience, lack endurance. If any man draw back, what does God say? My soul shall have what? No pleasure in him. But let us affirm like Paul what we think about ourselves. Verse 39. But we are not of them that what? Draw back unto what? Perdition, but them that what? Believe to the what? Amen. Let that be your experience. Let that be your experience. So we beg you again. Here is what has happened. You have a lot of ministries all over the place. And these ministries are always telling you, Sunday law, Sunday law, Sunday law. But they don't know where to look. They don't know how to see it coming. But God has blessed this church with the spirit of prophecy, so that we can tell you what is going on and demonstrate it to you in actual reality, that you would know how close the end is. We want you to know this. It's time for you to wake up. It's time for you to start talking to people the truths that you know. It is time for you to mean what you are doing. It's time for you to mean it with all your heart. And this is the reason why we call upon you to let Jesus reign in your life. Please let us start. Yes, my dear brother. So remember these things that we have shown you. You say, Brother Medina, what can I remember from the video? Just remember Europe has swung to the world. Right. And Europe has rediscovered what? Roman Catholicism. And it is a preparation for two things. For you to show them the Sabbath of Yahweh your God, but also for a Sunday law to pass. All they have to do is to get rid of the Pope and have a new Pope here. We had that his face on the last video I stopped, where he also is attacking what the Pope did, this cardinal. He's attacking what the Pope did and speaking against what the Pope did. We have him there. So what do you need? You need a new Pope, a kind of Pope with a papacy that the evangelicals will do miracles to support. So that's the next step, a new Pope. Watch the times, watch the news, and see what's going on. And we promise you here, from this pulpit, we will make sure we let you know what is going on. Amen?
Yeah, but one thing I notice for the longest while listening, I think, for the pay attention, is that really, if you put Mary as the main epicenter of everything, basically, people that become cold, callous, murderous, expressionless, insensitive, because it's a statue that they have a smile, and behind that are hidden traits. So you have the traits of the statue itself, and you just be persecuting people without any true conscience.
But the devil knows why he has put Mary, and he knows why. All they want is ethical Catholics, not converted Catholics. That's all they want. So they just put a figure to symbolize ethics. But they don't want converted Catholics. The devils don't want anybody to be converted. Because if as a Catholic you become converted, you become a Seventh-day Adventist. And of course, as the sister said, Seventh-day Adventists with the spirit of sacrifice, true one. So while they have you as a cold, ethical person, what you need is genuine conversion. So my dear brethren, remember these things that we have shown you here. One thing you remember, and what is that? That Europe has what? Which is? Which is? They are going towards? And what is soon to come? That is what you leave here with this remembrance. That is only time. Let us go ahead and let us pray. Gracious, loving Father, forgive us of our sins, justify us, make us righteous, make us become alive in Christ Jesus in obedience to your commandments, and teach others the truth to prepare for the end by endurance and by establishing our hearts in the faith of Jesus Christ as the end draws near. Please help us in these experiences. And may we be honest and true and be consciously enduring until the end comes. Thank you for your love towards us. Through the truth of Jesus Christ, the plan of salvation.